Hi, my name is Charlie, and welcome to Friends of Churchill. Today I'm interviewing Ben Foss of Strong Nation. Welcome, Ben.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So the first question we have for you is that when and where were you born?
I was born in New Haven, Connecticut in 1973.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Could you please share a few memories of your childhood or academic experience?
Sure. So I grew up in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is a cold place that was a good place to grow up. I really liked growing up there. My mom and dad moved there when I was very young, so I moved there when I was about 3 months old. I went to the Bernice A. Ray School in Hanover, New Hampshire, and I was identified as dyslexic in about first grade. I think art and probably history were my favorite subjects. And I went on to go to high school there, and then I went to college in Connecticut, and then I went on to do other academic degrees after that.
So what was school like for you?
School was a mixed bag. I really liked the social side of things, and I liked being able to learn. I liked being in class and having teachers actually be in the teaching mode where they were speaking or lecturing. But I had a really hard time with written material. It's sort of, for me, like having a bad cell phone connection to the page. And so I had a hard time with the default way of learning, and that made school pretty difficult for me in a lot of ways.
What was your most difficult year in school? And why is that?
Boy, that's a good question. Well, it probably was my sophomore year of high school. I had been in special ed, I'd been mainstreamed, and I really wanted to be part of sort of the popular crew because I had been excluded a lot because I was dyslexic. And so I went out for the soccer team, and I practiced really hard to make that soccer team. And when I didn't make the soccer team, in a practice I got yelled at by the coach, and when he wasn't looking I went and then actually injured myself. I went up to a goalpost when no one was looking, and I broke my own hand. So you can actually see on this bone here that it's still out of place. And that was, I did that so that I had an excuse as to why I didn't make that team. And I always try and tell that story because I think a lot of people who are dyslexic had some dark times in their lives, and there's not a lot of space to talk about it. We also had a lot of light times in our lives where we went on and did things that we're proud of. But it's important to notice both halves of that.
So you told us about what your favorite subjects were, but what was your least favorite?
My least favorite subject? That was probably my spelling and what they called reading and rhetoric, which was all grammar and the process of creating written text. I found it to be utterly useless.
So what college did you go to?
I went to Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, and I went there. I did a 4-year program there, and I did a program called Social Studies, which was economics and history mainly.
And what did you get a degree in?
From the College of Social Studies is my major, and it was in economics and history for the most part.
Did you have any big memories from college?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had college was a lot of fun. I had really good friends. I'm going back to my reunion this year. I'm going to see everybody I graduated with. I think people have a great time in college if they are able to really play to their strengths. So I enjoyed film classes. I enjoyed dance classes. I was someone who spent a lot of time in the library just because at the time, I hadn't figured out using audiobooks, so I was still trying to read with my eyes. I, certainly went to a lot of parties and had a good time. It was a good time for me.
What were some of your challenges you had to deal with during college?
Well, I think at the time, there was no accommodations in place, so I didn't get extra time on anything. I didn't have audiobooks. I didn't know how to talk to anyone about it, so none of my friends knew. When I went back to my 10th reunion, no one knew that I was dyslexic. I had hidden it so well. And so I think that hiding has a real cost to it, and it's a lot of work.
Could you please talk about a time that you had to overcome a major obstacle?
Boy, a major obstacle. Well, I think that was probably my first year of law school. My first year of law school, I was in a program that had people who used plain text as their primary way of reading. And I had a really difficult time with the way they were doing it. And the way that I started doing was I actually started using audiobooks. So I used books on tape. And I remember the first day that I went into a classroom and I used the audiobook. And it was actually an unexpected result. I went into the classroom and I was actually kind of angry because I realized how long I had been going without understanding what was in the books. I had been sort of winging it on going in and listening to a lecture. And on that day, I realized that for all of my education, I had been unintentionally denying myself access. If I had been using audio, it would have been better. And so I think the overcoming there was I made the transition from using eye reading, which is one type of reading, to using ear reading, which is another type of reading.
Just a little basic one. What is your strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I enjoy talking, and I think of myself as a fairly social person. I'm not real good at spelling or any kind of details like that. I think I can be probably sometimes too social. I can be a little overbearing or too forward, and it can be too much for people. So I've always tried to learn to just sit in silence and be a little quiet sometimes is a useful thing for me. I think I've also learned that it turns out people are more interested in what you're good at than what you're bad at. And so over the years, I have tried to be able to display that. So I'm comfortable doing things like public speaking and debate, but I also am learning to do things that are just for me. So gardening is something that I started doing recently, and I don't really show anybody my garden. It's just for me. So I enjoy those kinds of activities.
Now, what is your greatest accomplishment?
Probably this interview.
All right. Now, could you please list a few people who have been a huge influence on your life, and why are they?
Yeah, I think obviously my parents were a huge influence. They taught me how to advocate for myself and how to tell my story, which was really the most important thing I learned when I was young. As I grew up, I met a guy named Joe Stutz, and people can learn about him in a film called Headstrong. It's on the Headstrong Nation website. HeadstrongNation.org is a nonprofit that I helped start. And that film highlights Joe Stutz's story. I mean, he's really the Rosa Parks of dyslexia. He fought and won the first federal case to let people who are dyslexic be included in the workplace. So he, in the 1970s, was shoveling coal, and he wanted to be able to drive a truck, and they wouldn't let him do it because he couldn't pass a written test. And he thought that was unfair. And so he stepped up and said, I think it's unfair. And after 4 years of pushing on it, he was granted the right. And it's a right that was actually cited during the drafting of the Americans with Disabilities Act, that we now benefit from, the right that we are allowed an accommodation in the workplace.
And if you could go back in time and do something over again, what would you change?
Well, I'd probably edit some of these answers. I think I would start telling people who I am earlier, and I would put down a lot of the shame around dyslexia and around other parts of my life. I'd be more open and easy about who I am. And I think that would have relieved me of a lot of fear and anxiety that probably held me back from doing things when I was younger. Being much easier about telling a story and finding it amusing when I make a mistake versus beating myself up.
And the last question we have is, and pretty sure that everybody's kind of waiting to know, have you found anyone for Integration Ventures yet?
I have, actually. There's a number of entrepreneurs that I've been working with. And I've actually met a new team in San Francisco that is working on an even broader mission, which is to help women and people of color and people with disabilities become part of the entrepreneurship world. I think of us as unconventional entrepreneurs, people who don't anticipate you being a CEO someday. And that might be someone who's dyslexic and was in a special ed classroom, or it might be someone who's an immigrant and new to this country, or it might be someone who's in a wheelchair, people who kind of sometimes get excluded from the mainstream. So yeah, we found a number of people that we're working with in coaching and helping them get more capital. I recently actually put a dyslexic entrepreneur from the Midwest in touch with a venture capitalist, and it's going some good places.
Thanks for coming up with us, man.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.